Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Hadrien Gardeur. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Feedbooks. And today we're going to be talking about bookshelves in general. So not just a bookshelf for ebooks, digital bookshelf, but also real bookshelves. And how we can actually connect these bookshelves together in an ebook world. First of all, whenever we start talking about digital bookshelf, it is quite important to think about all the different things we can do with real bookshelf, real books, and how we use them, how we actually relate to bookshelves in general. First of all, the main purpose of a bookshelf, a real bookshelf, is to store books. And we actually tend to get more and more books over time, and we like actually having these huge bookshelves where we can display to everyone how many books we've been reading. And this is a very important part of the social experience that we have with books, actually. We sometimes even design our whole house around the idea of a bookshelf. And this is usually what we need to always lug around when we move from one place to another. We always keep these books close on us. Second purpose of a real bookshelf is usually to organize books. Using whatever mean we want, we usually organize books. It can be something purely aesthetic, like this example, but organizing a bookshelf can also be something very personal. You can organize a bookshelf based on past remembrance of a book. You can organize a bookshelf based on how you somehow believe that books relate to one another. And this is another very important part of building a bookshelf and how we interact with these elements. Real bookshelves also have an important design element to them. We actually like to design where we live around the idea of a bookshelf. And this is something that's actually very hard to translate into the digital world, and maybe the only element that I won't be talking about when talking about the transition from a real bookshelf to a digital bookshelf. But it is a very important part of our experience associated to the bookshelf. But the most important part, I think, is that books are essentially trophies. We like to surround us with these small trophies, and unlike all these new and exciting social network or services, we don't need any badges, we don't need any reward when we read a book. Displaying and adding the book to your bookshelf is actually the reward itself. And there's a very strong social status associated to the books that we read and the books that we decide to display in our bookshelf. And this is also something very important when we build all bookshelves. So, let's define the different types of digital bookshelf. Unlike real bookshelf, we tend to use various different services and various different digital bookshelves for very specialized purposes. First of all, one very important point, even when we move from the real world to the digital world, we have this very strong tie to what a bookshelf should look like, and we tend to copy and imitate the feeling of a real bookshelf. This is maybe something that we just need to continue this transition from a real bookshelf to a digital bookshelf, but this is something that you usually see in all these different services and applications. We need to reproduce this feeling of what a bookshelf looks like, and it sometimes feel a little cheap maybe, but that's how we imagine bookshelves the way they should be. One essential feature of these digital bookshelves is the ability to list and organize books. And actually, most of the services and software designed to list and organize bookshelves in the digital place were designed before the ebook market really exploded during the last few years. This is a pretty good example. For example, Delicious Library. It enabled people to easily scan their existing book and add them to a digital bookshelf where they can list, where they can share their bookshelf with friends, and they can also support things such as let people borrow books, for example. They know, oh, this friend has that book. All these important features when you have a very, very large bookshelf. Aside from scanning books and managing your bookshelf, a lot of social networks actually design themselves around the idea of a bookshelf. A very good example, and one of the most popular social network designed around books is Shelfari. And the interesting part, compared to the real bookshelf, is that we add naturally a social layer around these bookshelves. The real bookshelf, is usually something very personal. We display the books that we like the most, and we design the space around these books. We decide really what we'd like to do with these books, and it's a very personal experience. Maybe you can extend this experience to a household, but it's not something global. It's not something that you're going to be sharing with friends. You don't share shelf space with a friend. You don't share shelf space with people you don't know. And the interesting component between the real bookshelf and the digital bookshelf is, in social networks, that we add the social layer to books. Most of the time, these can be just basic elements, things like comments, reviews, taggings. But we also create all sort of other social interactions around these bookshelves. Not just reviews, not just comments, not just tags. We also add little games that we like to play around the books that we like the most. And we actually communicate a lot more using these services than we do with the real bookshelf. Well, at least we don't communicate more, but we tend to communicate more openly with strangers or people we don't know about what we read and what we like in our books. Goodreads is actually a pretty good example. You can see, aside from reviews and lists, you have all sorts of trivia, quotes, community reviews, all these little games that we like to add around these digital bookshelves. But the most important part about these bookshelves compared to the real one is that they're not a place where we store books. They're only a place where we store information about books. What we like about these books, when we read these books, what we think about these books. We don't store the ebooks on these services at all. Usually, when we store books, when we store ebooks, we tend to store ebooks in two different ways. The first one is the most basic and usual way to store digital files, is to store your books locally. We store books locally either on the devices, once again using this real bookshelf view, and we also store files on our computers, organize files, and transfer them on our various devices. But, and that's something that's actually much more recent, we tend to store our books more and more, not anymore locally, but also in a cloud, in highly dedicated and usually very vertical services. The perfect example for this is the Amazon Kindle. The whole idea of the Kindle store is actually based on the idea of a digital bookshelf that constantly stores your files, and where not only you can access the information about the book that you've bought, but where you can, using any devices connected to the ecosystem, download the files again. Unlike the social networks, unlike these dedicated